Spoke yesterday about President Trump's decision to remove the chief architect of Tehran's terrorism from the battlefield. And I discussed the Senate's obligation to approach this matter in a serious, sober, and factual way. It is right for senators to want to learn more about the president's major decision. Once again, I encourage all of our colleagues to attend the classified briefing which the administration will provide tomorrow. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the CIA Director will give classified context behind the President's decision. And they'll discuss the administration's strategy to protect our personnel and defend our nation's interest in the new landscape. I'd ask every senator on both sides to bring an open mind to the briefing. And in particular, we should all remember that the history of Iranian aggression began long before this news cycle or this presidency. In the decades since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, as the White House has changed parties and our administrations have changed strategies, Tehran's simmering anti-American hatred, proxy violence, and steady support for terrorism worldwide have remained entirely constant through all of these years. In effect, Iran has been at war with the United States for years. While they have taken pains to avoid direct conflict, Iran's authoritarian regime has shown no compunction about kidnapping, torturing, and killing Americans since its earliest days, or Iraqis, or fellow Iranians, for that matter. From the 52 diplomatic personnel held hostage in Tehran for 444 days back in 1979, to the hundreds of U.S. service members killed in bombings carried out by Iran's proxies. Beirut in 1983, Riyadh in 1995, Khobar in 1996, to the hundreds more killed or maimed in Iraq by the explosives and indirect fire attacks ordered by General Soleimani himself, to the constant flows of resources and equipment that prop up despots and terrorist organizations throughout the region. Iran's game plan has been an open book. Use third-party terrorism to inflict death and suffering on its enemies while avoiding direct confrontation. The threat Iran poses is certainly not new. Its violence is not some unique reaction to President Trump or Prime Minister Netanyahu or any other current leader. Violence runs in the bloodstream of this evil regime. In particular, our colleagues who apparently want to blame President Trump for Iranian profligate foreign policy should reflect on the recent history of the previous administration. Iran exploited President Obama's withdrawal from Iraq. Soleimani and his agents filled the void, dramatically expanding Iranian influence inside Iraq. They were able to impose a sectarian vision on Iraq that disenfranchised Sunnis, fuel the rise of ISIS, and plunge the region into chaos. And over in Syria, more weakness from the Obama administration opened yet another door for Iran. The Democratic administration failed to confront the Iranian-backed Assad regime as it slaughtered literally hundreds of thousands of Syrians and displaced millions more. Once again, amid the chaos, Soleimani worked and thrived. Of course, all of this was the backdrop for the brazen, legacy-shopping nuclear arrangement that sent billions of dollars to fuel Iran's further violence. Even my friend, the current Democratic leader, knew at the time because he himself voted for a resolution of disapproval on President Obama's deal. Senator Schumer said at that time, quote, "After 10 years, if Iran is the same nation as it is today, we will be worse off with this agreement than without it." That was the Democratic leader who opposed the Iran nuclear deal of President Obama. Well, the Democratic leader was prescient. That's exactly what happened. The previous administration failed to confront Iran when necessary, so the mullahs used their windfall from the disastrous nuclear deal to double down on hegemonic aspirations all across the Middle East. So, Madam President, a Democratic administration just had 8 years to deal with the growing threat posed by Iran. They failed. Demonstrably, Iran was stronger and more lethal at the end of the Obama presidency than at the beginning. So I'd ask my Democratic colleagues today, do not rush to lash out at President Trump when he actually demonstrates that he means what he says, when he enforces his red lines, when he takes real action to counter lethal threats against Americans. Wishing away tensions with Iran is really not an option. The Iranians have spent decades making that perfectly clear to all of us. The question is whether we, as a body, would prefer the administration stand by as Iran kills Americans, or whether we're prepared to work with the president to stand up to Tehran's terrorism and shadow wars